you've reached Gloria with Farmstead Talk, and I'm here today with Jennifer Haugland, and she's representing her state of Montana. Thank you, Jen, and welcome to this interview.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Sure. So, again, I know you're very busy. Thanks again for taking the time out to meet with me today. So if you would go ahead and share with the audience a little bit about where you're currently residing and what the demographics look like there.
Yeah, I was born and raised in the greater Bozeman area here in Montana. It's kind of in the southwest corner of Montana. My family's been here in the Gallatin County for 6 generations and have been on the same family ranch for 4 generations now. Bozeman's kind of a rural meets kind of a young, hip college town interface. It's, we're 20 miles from Bozeman here, and it's a huge, comparatively, it's a big city. Compared to where we are out here. Bozeman's about 46,000, Belgrade's about 7,500. So, they're 2 very pretty small towns in a more urban kind of county of Montana. So it's funny because everybody else calls Bozeman like the big city, but it's still pretty small comparative to other places.
Okay. So what inspired you to become a vet, and where did you study at?
I did my undergrad studies here at Montana State University. I majored in animal science, a science option. It kind of prepares you for going into vet school is kind of the goal, I guess, of that major. And then I went down to Colorado State University to do my vet school, and that was a 4-year program down there as well. I really started out my education in actually agricultural education. I wanted to be a teacher and educator when I was in high school. And then I kind of got in to my teachings, and I figured out that I kind of wanted to go to vet school. I had a horse that got really cut up, and I had the vet at the time kind of approach me and was like, hey, like, you should really go to vet school. You have kind of a knack for it. And so the next day I went in and changed my major, and it's kind of been history ever since. So kind of a big thing, life-changing thing, but really for the better. So.
Okay. And what would you consider the specialty that you actually practice?
My specialty is large animal medicine. I do food and fiber animals. So I kind of have a joke that, like, if you eat it or wear it, I'm your vet. And that includes everything, sheep, cattle to goats, potbelly pigs. I do work with horses, which don't necessarily fall into my category, but they kind of come with the large animal side as well. So I have quite a few horse clients as well.
Okay. So I'm sure that keeps you busy. What does your typical day look like?
My typical day, so I wake up about 6 in the morning, get ready, grab a cup of coffee, drive 23 miles into town. So we live out in the country right now. And so I usually have a couple of messages waiting for me at the clinic. I'll usually tuck those in my pocket and then give them a call when I'm on my way to my first appointment. This time of year, we're doing a lot of like pregnancy checking. So determining if cattle are pregnant or open. And then, so we get there and we set everything up, and I have an ultrasound. So I'll kind of set up a table shoot side, get my table ready. We have vaccinations that we give to pregnant cows, and then topical dewormer that we usually do on top, so commonly called a pour-on, that we administer. So I'll do, in the morning between 150 to 300 head, and we'll kind of wrap up that, try and have lunch with the ranchers. One of the best perks about being a large animal vet is that the ranchers usually have an awesome meal for you prepared at lunchtime.
Nice.
So that's always like a really huge benefit. And I kind of feel spoiled being able to go out in the field and have a nice lunch with ranchers and also get to know them at the same time. And so that brings us to about, noon or 1 o'clock. So we get out of there, and I usually have a couple appointments waiting for me at the clinic, Haugland's for people that are going down to warmer areas like New Mexico and Arizona. We have a lot of like snowbird people that take their horses down, and so we have to have those kind of Haugland's and health certificates for them. I usually have a couple minutes freed up, and then we'll have somebody that does like a walk-in. My grandpa was actually kind of notorious for just driving down with an animal that he needed to have a vet seen, and he'll just sit in the parking lot and wait till a vet got there and look at it. So it's really funny. It kind of warms my heart when I have people that just walk in and ask, like, can you look at my animal? Because it just brings back those good memories from like him doing that all the time to the vets. And work with 4-H'ers during the day. I have this is like one specific day that we have that start preg checking, do Coggins, come in. I have a walk-in appointment for like a cow that has a lump jaw, so we get that drained off. And then after that I have a 4-H'er that has 2 little goats that I need to dehorn, so we fully sedate them. I remove the horns, get everything kind of cleaned up, bandaged up, send them on their way. Have a client that needs a vaccine protocol, so they're waiting in the office. I go over the vaccine protocol, kind of send them out the door after we're done. I'll have a couple of emails, and then at the end of the day, it's like doing charges and kind of getting everything in a row there. So it can be, it's crazy because it can be very similar every day to day, but at the same time, it's so different. Like, you don't do the exact same thing every single day. And even if we are preg checking every day, it's a different experience just because we're going out into the field and getting to the different facilities that people have and the different cattle and different people. So it can be similar, but very different every day.
Wow, what an exciting life it sounds like. So your handle is Montana Cow Vet.
Yeah.
So would you say that most of your work is with the cattle?
Mostly, yeah. We have our client base is mostly beef cattle. We do everything. We're one of the very few clinics in our area that will actually see any of the minor species, and those include like sheep, goats, llamas, alpacas, pigs. And so there are a couple other clinics in the area that will see some cattle and horses, but they don't really do a lot of like the other small livestock species. And so our clinic sees everything. So we get a wide variety of species in the food animal, but it's definitely mostly cows. And that's kind of, I guess, my some of my favorites are definitely cattle. I like doing the cow side and the cow work with it just because of where I'm from. So
sure. So what would you say is the difference with working with cattle on a commercial level versus a small farm or a homestead?
Definitely.
For the perspective from your point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because there can be such a huge difference between it. And I don't know if it's like just a mindset, just a different mindset on what people have. A lot of times our commercial guys, they look at, I guess, the whole group instead of like an individual. So, a lot of the farmsteads, these guys have, a handful of cows, anywhere between, 1 to 10 up to 20. And so like they might have names for everybody. They might know like, they don't have numbers necessarily. They know like this is Daisy, this is her daughter Penelope. And we have clients that are like that. They definitely, farmsteads are sometimes more willing to do like diagnostics and kind of dive in and figure out, what's going on with this cow. They have a lot more invested into the cow itself rather than maybe like the whole group. And it's not like I'm not like for or against either one. It's an interesting way. I feel excited when I get to work with farmsteads because I feel like they're willing to do a lot more diagnostics. So it's kind of more of a fun puzzle chaser for me instead of just being like, yeah, we can treat this. This is probably what it is. For some of our commercial guys, like they just want me to make my best like professional decision and opinion on it instead of actually like trying to figure out exactly what's wrong. Most of the time, as veterinarians, we can get pretty close to be like this. Yeah, I assume that this is what's going on, from all of the information that I have, and we can treat with this, said antibiotic or this mineral change and be able to come close to what we're doing. But sometimes it's a little bit more fun for me to be able to actually go in and dive into that diagnostic side. So that's the biggest difference that I see. And then also just like the emotional versus cost, like true monetary cost versus emotional cost for those. So it can be a pretty big devastating thing when, when the cow is open. Did they keep her back do they keep her more as like a pet? Is it okay if she's not pregnant that year? Versus like commercial guys, if she's not pregnant and she's not like producing, she's only costing money. And so the farmer or rancher will just sell her and try and recoup some of that money of the lost calves going forward with her at like the market price. So it's a definitely different mindset for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like more of a personal, emotional touch on the smaller scale versus a more of a business aspect in your larger ranchers, which I get. I mean, it's their business.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the farmsteads, I mean, they have somebody else is bringing home, you know, the money to live on. So they have either somebody that's working in town, or they have another way means of life other than, you know, the cattle are a fun thing for them instead of like, you know, these guys have to make money, because that's literally the only thing that's making us money is them. So it can be more of like a relaxed thing as well, because it's not like their livelihood's not depending on them.
Sure, right. So is there a time of the year for you that is more intense, that you're more busier, or is everything pretty much steady for you year round?
Yeah, so our slowest time that we have is usually in the summer. Kind of June, July, August is typically when it's slowest for us. Fall starts preg checking time, and then we roll into winter and we do bangs vaccinating. So that's against brucellosis. All of the heifers in my county here in Montana all have to be bangs vaccinated. And so it can be, it's a pretty big project to get it all done in the winter time. And then spring kind of rolls in and we have calving balls. So everybody's starting to have calves drop, and helping with those, whether it be dystocias or calves with scours. And so that keeps us pretty busy in the springtime for sure. I'd say fall and spring are our busiest. Winter's kind of mediocre, and then summer is usually our slowest. With our area, it's funny because the more people we get in to our area, it seems that our horse inventory here keeps going up. And so our horse clients have just doubled in numbers. Like they're always increasing, which is just, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that the less ranches that are around with cattle means more horses, because everybody has, you know, a little farmette that they have with a couple of horses. So we definitely have seen an increase in horses, goats, kind of for fun hobby animals that we get to do.
If you could advise somebody that is pursuing to go to veterinarian school, what advice would you give to them?
Definitely just don't give up. I struggled in school. School was definitely not easy for me. I didn't have the best grades. I studied really hard and I worked hard for it. You know, and if someone tells you like you can't do it, like just pretty much prove them wrong that you can. And I just kept after it. I did 6 years of undergrad so that I could, you know, boost up my GPA and that I could look like a good candidate getting in. I had literally thousands of hours worked with a vet before I went to vet school. And I had really good mentors that we had to get letters of recommendation at the time when I applied. And they still do that now. And so like having a really good relationship with veterinarians that you work with and that believe in you goes a long ways. And pretty much just don't give up. Like I was too stubborn to ever give up. I applied 3 times and got in. And so, you know, it's just one of those things that if you want it bad enough, like sometimes being told no and like that is like a huge boost for some people to like be like, yeah, this is actually really what I want to do. So
out of all the things that you just mentioned, what would you say would be the number one thing?
The number one thing, probably getting like the relationship with the vets and like having that relationship with them as a mentor.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would think too, is having that experience and having the ability to converse with someone back and forth who is like-minded, who has that experience, who's doing the job that you want to do. I think that's really critical. So yeah, I agree. What about if somebody is starting out, a homesteader is starting out first time with cattle? What would you recommend to them as a first-time cattle owner? And what is the difference between owning dairy versus like cattle, meat cattle?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I guess depends on what their goals are with the animals. You can have like dairy cows, and they're fun because then you have the calves that come with those, and then the milk. So if you wanted to do something with the milk, then you can, picking the right breeds is definitely a good choice. Like sometimes the more docile breeds, like a Jersey or a Guernsey cow, are kind of more fun cows. So you get to do something. They actually like being handled. And then in our meat side as well, you know, getting a kind cattle breed. The Angus can be really good depending on where you get them from. Herefords are typically really friendly. And just picking animals that you can handle is a big thing. Also, when you're getting started, thinking about, like, do I have a trailer to move them? Have a pen to get them loaded into the trailer. It's surprising how many people that I go do stuff for, and they don't have any way to, like, handle their cattle, and it's okay for the most part, especially if they're halter trained, because they can get them loaded in the trailer that way. Not all cattle are okay with that. Remembering having a plan for when something goes awry is actually sometimes more important than getting the animals themselves. I would tell people that, you know, get set up and you don't have to have the fanciest trailer, you don't have to have the fanciest setup, but at least a way that you can get the animal handled, because they are a livestock animal, and, you know, they're going to weigh, the big beef cows can weigh 1,600 pounds. So they're huge. And, like, even the little, like, Jersey cows, they weigh 1,000 pounds. And so if you think that you, as, you know, a moderately sized person, are going to be able to kind of manhandle them, you are very mistaken. So that's always my number one to tell people is, like, make sure that you have a place to handle them before you actually get the animal. It's not like a secondary thing. It's something you want to do very first. So.
Okay, one question that I have, and we didn't talk about this before, I'm just kind of throwing this out there, but can you give me a sign of a cow that is wanting, or a body language for aggression for a cow? The reason I ask, this is kind of a funny story, but it scared me to death. I live in open ranching area in southern Colorado, and I have the cattle here have open grazing rights, and they break down my fences all the time, and they come in and they try to eat all of my farm animals' foods and this and that. Yeah. And I had one that got separated from its herd in a separate pen, and I was trying to get it out, and usually I can just hold up my hand and they just kind of move away. Well, this time I was trying to get this cow out, and it wasn't going to have it, and it ran in a circle real quick, and I started to think, well, this is really funny. And so I went and got a rake, and I held the rake above my head and tried to walk behind it, and that thing, I was probably about, I don't know, 20 feet from it, and there was like no warning. This thing actually charged me.
Oh yeah.
And it was so frightening. Yeah. And I was out there in the morning with my clogs on, you know, half my pajamas and my clogs with no socks. I'm running to a chicken pen so I could, you know, get away from this cow. Yeah. But I got to tell you, it was very frightening, and I never expected it. Expected it. Like, it didn't do like they usually do, like put their heads down or, you know, stample their feet, nothing. It just looked at me and just charged at me, and it stopped within like 5 feet of me, and it left dust on my forehead from stopping so fast.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It was terribly frightening. So, what's that?
I said, I bet it was, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, more people in America get, like, killed and ran over by cows than, like, by almost any other species. Just because they are really dangerous, and, like, it's funny because they can be so kind. And then all of a sudden, you know, like, they are an animal, and they have a very strong fight or flight kind of response. I'd say, you know, I work a lot at the stockyards too, and so I see a lot of really mean cattle down there that, you know, they've kind of been pushed to their limit, and they are on high adrenaline mode. And so you can take cows that are, you know, normally very docile, put them in that environment, and they can just, like, flip a switch like that. You know, a lot of things I look for is, like, high head raising, so they'll stand up. Like, almost like stand up really straight, like up on their feet. And they'll like look at you straight on, and that's a warning sign. Like if they are like have ears up looking at you straight on, that is a warning sign. Like you need to back up. I'm going to charge, or I'm going to fight or flight. Anytime cattle like try and like climb fences too, they also are like, if they're like going in, they're trying to find a hole. If you're standing in the hole, that's where they're coming to, and they will run over the top of you. Like they don't care, especially if they're upset. So yeah, I definitely looking for those signs. Like we call them high-headed cattle. And that's the reason, is that they're looking for a hole. They're looking for us to be able to.
So when you say, not to interrupt, but when you say a hole, does that mean like an area for them to get out of a fenced area?
Yeah, so an opening in a gate.
That's what they were looking for too.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So and that's what they're doing, is that they're looking for. And if you're standing in the way, yeah, they're gonna come right over the top of you. Like gates, open gates, holes in the fence. Like if you have like a barbed wire fence and it has like a soft spot, they're gonna try and crawl through there. Yeah, so there's a lot of things, like especially with Farmstead people, I like to just give them warnings about. I'm like, give them space. Like if they get upset, like never try and move a cow by yourself. Always try and take cows in pairs, if not more. When you get too many, of course, it's hard to handle them sometimes, but having a cow by itself can turn a cow that's like so calm and so docile into just a wild animal, just because they get so scared and so nervous. And so they just get that adrenaline pumping. And so then it's really hard to bring them back down from that. Yeah.
Wow. So their natural habit, would that be like just like in a grazing position, or like what is their calming, like an everyday calm position where they're not real alert?
Yeah. So, usually, so if you look at a cow, they have that flat top line. So if their head is like just at like level with the top line, or even like just a little bit raised or lowered, as they're walking, when you go appreciate a cow in a field, you can kind of see where that head is, up or down. So when they're grazing, they're going to be comfortable. Any animal that has a high adrenaline can't graze. Like it's just their body turns off that, that drive to want to eat and digest. And so they are in no interest in eating. So getting an animal back to where they're eating is a good way to get them calm back down. And then just as they hold their heads too is like a good indicator, like cows that kind of keep their head at shoulder level or lower as they're walking, they're calm. Like they're just moving along and doing their normal cow thing. Versus if they have their head up really high, like those are your more alert cows, and those are going to be ones that can cause a problem for you for safety wise, for sure.
Wow, good information. Thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know that. So now I know to keep an eye out for cows that have high heads. So thank you.
Exactly. Keep away from that.
What would you say is the top ailment that you see in bovine?
So as far as like disease wise goes, I see a lot of like lump jaw in cattle. So it's just a bacterium that kind of sets up in the jawbone of the cows. So you'll actually see it starts out as like kind of a soft abscess in the jawline, and then it can actually turn into a true bone abscess. Unfortunately, once it gets into the bone, there's not a lot that we can do to fix it. We can give some kind of older type medicines to like stop the infection. Usually those medicines also abort the calf. So if she's pregnant with a calf, then it's kind of, do we want to save the cow and try and manage the disease, or do we want to try and save the calf? A lot of our producers that have commercial cattle, they'll sell those lumps. They're called lump jaw cattle at the yards, and just try and recoup costs of those. They are generally not very good back on range, just because their teeth can kind of get messed up as well. So that's a big one. And it's a pretty significant disease that we see. It happens anytime that the cows are eating rough forage. So hays or like cheatgrass, you get like the grass seed awns that kind of get their way worked down into the gums. And so it's just that one's a big one that I deal with. Let's see, also foot rot as well. So that's also caused by a bacterium that's in the soil. A lot of times where it's like kind of too wet, we see that kind of a break in the skin, and then that bacteria kind of sets up there and works and it will make a swelling up the leg. And so treating that with an antibiotic is a pretty good way to treat that. It's usually not life-threatening, and we can manage that. It's just more of a production decreaser. So bulls that seem to get that the most. And so treating those guys during breeding season is really challenging because they don't want to come in from the cows, and they're already kind of hurting as well. So that can be tough. In our area, we're pretty lucky because we don't have like a parasite problem like they do in other parts of the country. So we do deworm, but it's not like the worm burdens that they have down in Florida or Texas and down in that area. But those are kind of my top two ones. We have dystocias in the spring, so cattle that have like cow-calf mismatch, essentially is what we call it. So the calf is too big for the cow, so doing cesarean sections are kind of helping with those births if they can come naturally, helping with those. So that's kind of those are some of the bigger ones that I deal with.
Okay. In regards to breeding practices, I know there's a lot involved with breeding cows. What are the practices, and what is, in your opinion, is the best practice overall? Like artificial insemination or natural, or?
Yeah, I guess, it all comes back to like what are your goals with your animals? If you have a high production AI, if you want to AI all of your heifers to a really high producing bull that has like low birth weights, to kind of ensure that you're not going to have problems, or less problems, I should say, going forward. That's a great reason to AI, so you can be like selective with those with the bulls you want to pick. It's also nice too, especially for our farmstead people that don't want to have to deal with a bull. It's nice to be able to AI those cattle as well, that you don't have to worry about a bull. You can just kind of work with either your local vet or local breeder. They have different, like ABS is one of the companies, Select Sires, and they have like a whole register of bulls that you can choose from, and they have really great people that they work with that can help you set up cattle, as well as help breed them. And so that's a nice option too for people that don't want to have to deal with a bull on their property, because they can be super destructive. And what do you do with them, the other 300 plus days a year that they're not actually working? And so I know ranchers, it's like a love-hate relationship, I feel like, that ranchers have with bulls, because they're always like, they're a pain, like they break fences, they're always hurting each other, just because they're just literally the bull in the china closet. I mean, the saying goes. So and so I personally, for ranching, I like doing the natural selection. Humans will never be as good as bulls at getting cows bred. It's just how nature works. Like, you're going to miss some of the cows that don't show heats very well. And those bulls, they have a sense, they know what they're doing. And so that way, like my family, we all use natural cover with bulls, and it works really well for us. I don't honestly have a preference over each way. It kind of depends on what your situation is, and what is going to be the best thing for you. For us, it's the way that we run our cattle. It's not, we would have a hard time doing an AI program, versus like using the bulls is a lot easier for us, and it's a lot less time sensitive. Like we can just worry about getting the bulls in on this certain day. We don't have to worry about syncing up the heifers or doing anything that way. So,
Do you keep a lot of bulls on your property, or just a couple?
yeah, we have, so the stocking rate that's been most people use for bulls, depending on their area, is between one bull for 20 to 25 cows. And so that's kind of the ratio that you want. You want one bull for every 25 cows that you have. And then kind of playing the odds, like sometimes people will add, so like we have 30 heifers. So we put in 2 bulls with them. And it's not because that one bull probably couldn't do all 30, but it's a way to ensure that we kind of hedge our bets and make sure the one bull, if there's something that happens to him, then at least we have another bull that's there as well. So, we have a couple different little pastures and kind of keep everybody together in those. So
Interesting. If there's something that we haven't discussed, I mean, we've covered quite a few topics about bovine. Is there anything that you can think of that would be important for someone that's new into cows that we haven't talked about that they maybe that you could shed a light on or inform
Yeah, for sure.
us about?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to, if you're thinking about getting into cows, just go in and talk to your local veterinarian, and find somebody who does cow work ahead of time, and they can help you in a lot of ways. I mean, if you are in, like, they might know somebody who has like a nice set of cows that they're trying to sell, or they can kind of direct you to different people that way. So the local vet not only like is good for like when you have like emergencies and problems that way, but also we're kind of a big part of the community in that, like, we go and we're part of everybody's operation at least once, twice a year. So we know kind of what's happening in the community, and we can help you get started. Like, do you need a cattle chute? Well, I know, Joe down the road is selling like some corrals in a cattle chute because he's, moving this place. And so that's also like a really good avenue to go to, is just go in and start that relationship with them early. Talking about vaccine protocols and different feed protocols. The local vet that does cow work is a huge wealth of information above and beyond what you would maybe expect, just for medicine side, because being part of the community, you just have a lot of ties, and you can help people along, and using your vet that way too is kind of a fun thing for us as well.
Well, we're just about ready to wrap up, and I have one final question for you. I know that you've been living in this ranching community your whole life, and your life is probably consumed with practicing animal medicine. But do you consider yourself a homesteader?
I do consider myself a homesteader. I definitely live like a frugal life. We reuse mason jars for both drinking water and for canning. We grow our own food. We actually just got back a beef. My family did. She was down, and it was one of those things where it's either we have to either utilize the meat and take her to the butcher and get that kind of test, or kind of not do anything with it. And so that didn't feel right to us. So, making her into burger was the best way that we could utilize that. And so, yeah, I definitely believe in living that life. I have a garden. I grow flower pots and everything else. So definitely kind of big on the recycling and homesteading side for sure.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much again for joining me on this interview. I appreciate your time, and have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jen. Thanks a lot.
Yep.